Welcome everybody to your Bread for Today podcast. I'm your host, Tonisha Russell. And before we get into what your bread for today is, I am super excited because I have a lovely, lovely guest who I absolutely adore and who I have known for quite some time now. It actually has been about 5 or 6 years maybe. And I'm just really excited to have her on our show because she is just like a source of wisdom. I don't think Rose in her we're gonna be talking to Rosie Washington today, and I don't think Rosie knows like how much she has impacted my life. She's younger than me, but I'm always like, man, she's so smart, she's so wise, she just knows so much stuff. And I'm like always trying to like just sit in her company and soak up as much as I can. And so I'm really excited to have Rosie Washington as our guest on the show today. Woo woo! So welcome, Rosie.
Thank you.
Introduce yourself to the people as little or as much as you like. And then we'll get into the bread.
So I'm just a small town Kansas City girl. I just said from Kansas City. But, I am a Black woman. I am a preacher. I am a community organizer. I'm an enrollment specialist. I'm just everywhere. So I'm just so glad to be here with you, Tonisha. And I want you to know, like, you be saying so much nice stuff, and I just love you, girl. I'm gonna carry you in my pocket. I appreciate you.
Thank you. So we have a lot to talk about today, y'all, because so much has been happening in the world, and we know that you can't rely on what you're used to relying on. We know that that's just not how it's going down, because if 2020 is shown us nothing, right? It's like that it's a wash. It's a wash. All the things that you thought you knew, all the things that in the ways in which you thought you was finna handle something, right? Like for us, you said March 18th in our previous talks, but for me it was March 13th. That's D-Day for me. Like, man, done, right? But also there has been a lot of beauty, right? And a lot of growth and a lot of maturity that had to come out of this time. And so we're just gonna like talk about that. We're just gonna, dialogue about that, about some of the ways in which the things that we used to know, the ways that we used to do things, the things that we were accustomed to and the comforts and all of that, talk a little bit for me about how this time of pandemic, racial unrest, all of the things that are happening in our world, right? How this has shifted your perspective of what you have known life to be. So like, what was it before, right? In terms of money, time, age, like all the ways in which we've been institutionalized and socialized to believe that our lives should be. Tell me a little bit about how that has shifted since.
Yeah, so I'll start with the fact that I was one of the folks who felt very woke prior to the pandemic,
right,
that we're in. I was just like, yeah, I'm a free Black girl. I fight for liberation on a daily, trust Jesus. I roll, I was ready. Like I was out here. And then life stopped for me on the 18th. Our offices shut down and we shifted to working from home. And what I discovered was that I wasn't as free as I thought I was. And also succumbed and subscribed to many notions about what was normal and what was what I should be aspiring to, whether it be career-wise, relationship, where I lived,
right,
and how you function in the world. And so the biggest takeaway in this moment for me has been that anything is in fact possible, and that there is no script or timeline or a template, so to speak, about when you get there, how you get there, and what you're able to imagine. Like my imagination was stifled by, okay, have this career, find somebody, get married. You know the traditional, like at some point.
I live in that tradition right
Exactly. And so for me, I had finally settled prior to COVID. Oh, it'll happen in my time. I was cool with that. But then it also like became an option in post-COVID that maybe I don't have kids. And I'm okay. I'm okay with that. I have six nieces and nephews, by the way.
Right.
I feel like my siblings have taken care of whatever responsibility I had to reproduce. So I'm settling in like I could be the cool auntie, like things like that of like just of like life can be whatever to be and whatever you need it to be. Because in crisis we have found that we're still surviving. Yeah, it's tough and yeah, it's rough, but we are still making it, and in many aspects we're thriving. Right. So I look at just your podcast alone, Tonisha, like the fact, we got bread for the day. You know what I'm saying? Like that's birthed out of some things. And I'm sure it was in the incubation process before, but here we are where these things are possible and we're beginning to, I think, really live into what we want for ourselves. And something I hadn't distinguished before about what had been prescribed for me to want and what I actually want. And in this quiet time, this pandemic time, honey, I've been like, what do you want? Rosie, what do you want? I mean, Tonisha, we just had a presidency of 4 years of someone
right
had no business, right? According to what we know, he shouldn't have been president, but here we are. He wasn't impeached. He had a whole 4 years. And so in that vein, anything's possible. I want.
Right. Which is interesting because this idea of choice, right? Because he was impeached, but he just didn't leave, right? Like, I'm just not going to leave. And that's just what I'm going to do. And y'all going to go along with it. So what does it look like then for me to live my life, right? As a mediocre white man who says, I'm just not.
The thing I learned from him, I can do anything's possible. Thank you. That's the one thing you will ever get from me.
Right. But talk to me a little bit about, because you mentioned some key buzzwords, I think, about this script, right? The script that we live by, the script that we ascribe to, that we have placed ourselves as a character in, right? This notion of time. I'm always like, what is time, right? Like when I learned that money wasn't real and that it's just energy, that changes the game, because you then have to do things a different way, right? This notion of, you said you became more imaginative, right? Like, what does that mean in the context of, talk about before though, right? Because I feel like some of our listeners, right, may be like, but I ain't to the place where you are, Rosie. And so if I am, not there yet, what does that look like? Because my whole thing is, you want someone to kind of commiserate with you. I'm always like, tell me how you wasn't doing well before you got to that place, because I ain't there yet. So talk a little bit about that, and then talk about the ways in which your imagination has in fact shifted, and like some of the steps that we can take to kind of get there.
Yeah. So I would say, prior to the pandemic, I was looking to start my consulting business. And that was a big step for me in the first place. So I'm already thinking, I'm rolling. I'm like figuring out how to hone in on my skill set and then present that to others who have found, whatever I offer, whether it be on nonprofit organizations or ministry work or social justice work, folks have been looking for a kind of concentric way to access that information. And so I was just trudging along. I was like, I need my EIN, I gotta, get an LLC going. I gotta do XYZ. I gotta, figure out what's an invoice. I gotta, all of the
The
things,
ways in which they told you had to do it.
like this is what a business is, and this is what it means to be an entrepreneur, right? So this is one example of where I was before. And after pandemic, my phone was ringing and folks needed the information, and there was no EIN number, and there was no, I don't have a price list. What do you mean? Like, you want me to jump on your Zoom? I'll jump on your Zoom. And therefore, we made a decision like, oh, we agreed to a contract, right? There was no paper. There was no email trail. It was like, if you sit on this call for 2 hours, I'm going to give you this. And I got paid for it. And I'm like, isn't this a business?
Right.
Like, am I really a business right now? Like, are these the services I've been trying to find a business consultant for, and all of these things? And not that those things don't matter. It just didn't have the same weight that I was giving it prior to. Another example for me prior to COVID was, I'm sitting at my 9 to 5. I'm doing this so I can get to what I really want to do. And now I'm learning, in this process of like transition, or maybe I could just do what I'm supposed to be doing and still get paid. Like, it's still a
Come on now.
Imagine a world where I don't have to wait on somebody to say this is how much you're worth per hour.
Let's go there, because how do you get to the point where you can begin to imagine that world? Because I had to, my husband's an entrepreneur, and he has shown me a lot in his way, in which he thinks about money and all the things, right? Like his whole idea is like that none of this is real. And so I don't know why you tripping about X, Y, and Z, right? Like, come on, the money is there. We've already taken care of all of those things. But talk about that for me a little bit.
Yeah. So how did I get to this place? I was sitting at home like everybody else. I couldn't
right.
go. And I kept seeing, and so I will add that the era we're in with social media, right? So I'm not just sitting at home, I'm sitting at home and seeing so many people do what they love, and seeing people branch out and begin to imagine. And so my imagination sparked about, well, if this person can live into their truth and discover whatever that is, what do I really want? And this year has been a year of me asking that question about, Rosie, what is it that you want? What is it that you truly desire across all facets? And so when we get to the money conversation, let's be very clear. Prior to and currently, I have a horrible relationship with money. It is like the root of all evil in my mind.
I know it.
My number one aspiration. Like, it's this real weird relationship. And like you said something earlier, once you realize money was actually energy. For me, I realized money is actually fuel. It is the gasoline that allows me to actually carry out my call. And so when I start shifting what it meant to actually be, saying, no, I actually charge for those types of conversations, which feels weird because it's like,
right,
talking, I'm just being me, and it's what I love to do, so I don't want to charge anybody. But when it comes like, no, this is how I'll be able to set up structures so that I can reach the people that I believe God has called me to reach. And I can't do that without being resourced. And so once I start changing how I viewed finances, I was able to start saying, okay, Rosie, what do you want? Who are the people? Who are your people? Who is your audience? And what is the content, or what is the message right now that they need to be hearing? And what is God telling you about that? And that alone time with God, like without people knocking on my office door or being distracted or being able to get up and go. Because, I live in New Orleans. So, it's always something to do. But we couldn't do that. We were shut down. I mean, yo, Tonisha, do you realize everything was closed? Like,
listen.
I was like, oh no. So if you wanted to go somewhere, you went to the grocery store. That was
right. And
that was your
that for me, that was already my like me time because I got all these kids, So it's like, man, you even taking the grocery store from me? Like that's what I would do.
That was me. It was like, what is happening? And so I think that mandated time to just really, I couldn't escape what passion was saying. I couldn't escape what purpose was saying. And again, going back to the social media piece, I have examples of people doing exactly what I need to be doing. And that is living into the moment and figuring out how to make it work. And we as Black people, particularly Black women, we figure out how to make it work. It just happens. And so
if we don't do nothing else.
If we don't do nothing else. And so it's like, if I can figure out how to make it work for a 9-to-5, if I can figure out to make it work to serve others and their stuff together, if I can figure out how to make it work for family, why can't I figure out how to make it work for me?
Yeah.
And what's the difference? And so I found out there was an investment deficit on my part to myself. And that came from staring at a wall one day, Tony.
Listen.
I was just like, what are you doing? Like, I had just got off the phone helping a friend, and I love that. And that really is my call, and that's my work. And I'm not complaining about that. But I was like, when do you ask yourself the questions you're asking her? When do you actually take the time to write down what lives inside of you? Right. And so this is that shift of like, before it was more performative, I would say, pre-COVID. It was like, yeah, I got it. This is what I do. Us Black women, we know how to make the struggle look good. Baby.
$1 out of 15 cents. Come on.
You understand? You make people want to say, matter of fact, why don't I try this, like this poverty thing? Let me try this stressed out thing. They make it look good. And so
a mess.
And it's beautiful because we've perfected it and we've had to for so long. But post, March 18th, it seems that I start asking the question, who are you wearing it for?
Ooh, say that one more time, Rosie. Say that one more time.
Who is you wearing this mask for, boo? Who and for why? And I think that collective trauma we've all experienced, is one thing where we have, we've had our individual run-ins and confrontations that cause life-changing momentum. But I think there's something to the fact that we're all experiencing this together. And for me, it was much easier to put down my mask and take off my mask because there was no one paying attention, because everybody was trying to figure out how to make it work. There was no one looking to me to be strong. There was no one with the expectation that you got it together, because you never had it together anyway.
You never had it.
So for the first time, I think the pressure of the expectation was lifted because everyone, and we're talking about globally. And one thing that I think for people in this time is that we start looking from I guess an American context, which we always do. Like, we view the world through American lens, and like, it's global. Like, there are people outside of the United States of America. And I think this was a great reminder of, like, we not the only ones who do life. And I really think that shift for folks was really powerful, in that not just this country is suffering or, encountering this collective trauma, but the whole world. And what does it mean? And what purpose now in a world that is flailing?
Right.
World that is, it seems to be asking the question, what is actually important.
Right. And so there's so many things that I want to pull out of there. And I just hate that we just have to, get on with it. But because you talk about this performance, who are you wearing this mask for, right? And if you guys, so my listeners out there, your bread for today is just to kind of free yourself from the pressure of the mask, right? The suffocation, right? And the asphyxiation of that, right? So freeing yourself from the constraints of time, right? You should be a certain place at a certain time in a certain world, right? Freeing yourself from the constraints of money. I don't have enough, right? That there is not enough, right? Of scarcity, of all of these different ways in which we've been socialized, we've been institutionalized, we've been like compounded, right? And then you have to sit with yourself, face yourself, and then decide who is it that I actually want to be when I don't
Face
have.
yourself. That's the one. Face yourself. That's the one.
Yeah. And that's tough. So talk about that, right? Like that is
Yeah.
just because you might find that you don't like who you are.
Oh my God.
And then you got to do something about it.
No, that's a guarantee.
Right.
And that is that self-confrontation in any facet, even void of a pandemic. It is the hardest thing to do, but it is the most rewarding thing you will ever do. It's
Agreed.
sitting with yourself
Agreed.
and being honest with yourself. Who are you really? What is your heart actually saying? Not what your mouth is saying, because I've been trained well. I half the time I speak, it is not what I thought first, which is a good thing. Everything I think shouldn't be said. But Rosie, where are you really versus where have you presented yourself to be and where others believe you to be? And I had to, pandemic wise, that confrontation looked like I had to really wrestle with the fact that I have a horrible relationship with money. I had to really wrestle with the fact that as I evolve as a Christian, what I believe and what some of the people who taught me believe are two different things, but I'm still a Christian. I had to really,
oh yes,
it's like, and that doesn't make me a heathen, and it doesn't make them demons. There are two different realities in which we've come to know Christ, and so what I believe based on the word of God is still valid, and there is a mandate for me in a season like this to begin to change the vanguard on how we reach people. People are thirsty for something, for guidance, for leadership. I think the question everywhere has been, where are our leaders? Because during pandemic we had all of the uprisings around police brutality. Remember, pandemic wasn't just still, it was a lot of illumination happening on the ground in terms of social justice, where people were like, wait a minute, what's happening? And without me confronting myself, I wouldn't have been able to answer the call of, actually, it's not new. It's been happening, but now that you're activated and you're listening, here's what we can do, right? But if you're not honest with yourself about the fact that I've been doing this work for, since I went to college, I was a student activist from that age, threatened by the KKK as a junior in college. I was bitter about the fact that I had to acknowledge that I was bitter about the fact that so many people seem to not have known that these are things. I was mad. I was like, I was seeing all these Facebook posts of like, oh my gosh, I didn't know. And I'm like,
where you been living? Not in 2020, right?
You sure you wanted to know? Was you trying to know? Like, how could you not have known? And confronting myself around my time constraints of when people should come to know. Like you should have been known. Who am I?
Right, right.
How did I decide that?
Right.
And what makes me, and figuring out what that is, right? What
Mm,
part of me feels entitled
mm,
to dictate others' journey. That's
mm.
not a pretty thing. Like you know, and when I trace it back, I was doing this since I was 2. Of like, girl, you should have. What do you mean? Like, get your life together. Like that has been a thing. And so pandemic wise, I've now begun to like really, really dig deeper about where that's coming from and what that complex really means about me. And how then do I change it so I can be a better leader? Because even though I don't say it, especially in a sensitive time like this, people can feel it. Right. And so I
For sure.
conversations that I've had in recent years where it just didn't go anywhere and I couldn't figure out why. It's probably because they knew I was sitting there like, this stupid because you should have.
Right.
And
Right.
that's
But
a
not
leadership
being
moment.
aware enough, right? Of your
Aware
own
enough.
self, not being
That was
willing to
me.
see. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's right.
Oh
That was me.
yeah.
That wasn't
Yeah.
them. And so that's the type of confrontation you have to have with yourself to be like, I'm not all great.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Don't get me wrong. I'm fly and all of that. But it's some parts of me, oh my God, that need some deep excavation and some exploration that to make me who I'm actually called to be, which is
Mm.
authentically
Mm.
compassionate, not performative in that way, but like to truly seek to understand where folks are. Like there's like as a Christian, our mandate is to meet people where they are. But you can't meet them where they are if you're judging where they are. And if you have something to say about the fact that they're there.
Come on, preacher. If y'all
You
didn't
know,
know, Rosie is a minister, okay? And she got the word deep down in her.
in my
So
soul. And I'm telling you, I still get it wrong. So listen, you
that
got to
part.
check yourself. You've got to be willing to sit with yourself and really be honest about the innermost thoughts of your heart, not just your head, but what is my heart saying? Therefore, what am I saying? And
That's good.
but it you feel when you talk about free yourself, when
Mm-hmm.
you can look at yourself and say, I like this, and this, but I gotta work on that, and that. It's liberating because once you name it, you can address it. If you ignore it, this is key. If you ignore it, you can never change it. And it doesn't go away just because you say it's not there.
Right. And so what then is that process to like begin to free yourself, right? So are we just making internal lists? Are we like what has been kind of your process, right? I know you said you talked a little bit about the money, having to change your relationship to money. Is it like saying I was a really crappy friend in this instance, and so now this is how I'm not going to be like that anymore? Or I'm in the midst of pandemic, Rosie, and I don't even know. I'm stuck, right? Like I can't
Yeah.
which way. I can't look with any way because each way I look, something is telling me, right, that perhaps I need to change this about myself. Perhaps I'm not good enough in this area. How do I reconcile the fact that I'm not good enough in this area and that I want to be better? Or maybe I just want to continue to be a bum. Like, what is the process
Exactly.
of freeing yourself like really look like? And then why am I even doing that? What's at the end of the day, if you say none of this is real, if you say, you know what I'm saying, that is all make believe, if you say that, you know, loving people who are difficult to love is a process, you know, what's the point? What's the point?
Yeah. So the hard thing about your question is that it's all of those things at the same time because we're not in the same place on everything, right? So in finances is now that I understand how deep my negative relationship ran and how it has impacted me. Now I could create a plan of like, okay, this is how I'm going to shift my thinking around money in order to make sure that I reach my folks. in areas like you know, where should I physically be in the world, physically located in the world. I'm in that, girl, it's pandemic. I ain't got time to think about that. I can't even fathom a world where I'm figuring out a different state or place to live in. If it's friendships, you know, I'm taking a deep dive into thinking about those who have gone away, even those who have outwardly done things to me that we pulled the trigger on. It's like, oh, because you did that to me, we're not friends anymore. But now I'm internally processing, was I always the greatest friend? You know,
What's my role in it? Mm-hmm.
yeah, what happened there that I could have done better? Yes, that thing happened. We are not going to erase that. But there are also ways in which I could have been a better friend. And what are those ways? And then figuring out, Tonisha, if there's some things I need to revisit with people. Is there some reconciliation or simply apologizing that has to take place? And that's the hard.
Yeah.
It's not always about getting back to a person, but it is about acknowledging that this was a blind spot for me that I didn't recognize until 5 years later. And you were made to feel like it was all you. But I do want to acknowledge that even though, so in relationships, in Indian relationships, I know I'm going down a rabbit hole, but I've learned that when folks deal with me, because I talk for a living across all the facets that I work. And so because folks couldn't figure out how to articulate what their gripe was, then it wasn't real. Mm-hmm. I would always ask, so explain give me an example. And they'd be like, it just is, you know, and I would take that to be like, well,
it's you.
Clearly, then it exists because I'm giving you a list. I'm telling you, it's this, and I need this, and this, and here's an example, right? But because folks communicate like me, I dismiss these feeling words, like I just feel like, and I'm like, but what have I done to garner that feeling? And they're like, I can't explain it. And all of those I can't explain it in pandemic have been like, oh, were you picking up on spirit? Were you picking up on that dialogue that I'm having? I never said it, and I don't think I ever acted on it. You know, at least I tried really hard not to. So there's a reason there was an example they could give. Because it wasn't a tangible thing. It was definitely a material thing, material impact on folks. And so now I'm in the process of assessing, where have I done that to people that I truly love? And because they couldn't articulate, I threw them away, dismissed them, or let them walk away. You know, and how do I prevent that in the future?
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because as much as we don't want to kind of wrestle with those things, don't want to have to go back, we see now that in so doing, right, it frees us up to receive. And I talk about in a previous episode about how, like, before I was walking around my fist clenched, right? Yeah. And in doing that, like, just tense. And that, I think that's a Black woman thing too, right? Just like Absolutely. This tension that we carry unnecessary. And it's not even unnecessarily, but like that is very a visceral kind of response to the trauma that is inflicted upon our bodies every single day. Absolutely. Right? But in so doing, I am unable to then receive all the things that the good that could possibly come to me. And that's how, and like the energy with the energy of money, right? Like if I'm trying to hoard, if I'm trying to hold on to everything, and that was my trauma, my own growing up poor, all of the realities of what money could mean, right? But once I let that go, then it's like the spirit's like, here, I just want to give you. I want to give this to you. I want to bless you. I want you to be free. I want you to have the abundance that you know what I'm saying? And it's not just money, obviously, it's all the different ways that God provides for us, etc. But just holding on to that, right? Believe, and not even in a kind of stingy way, but just in a lack of understanding of my own worth, my own value, of all that I am worthy of, right?
Amen.
So revisiting that, getting in touch with that for myself has freed me up to then say, if someone wants to do something good for me, if someone wants to give me a compliment, if someone wants to, right, then I am now able to receive it. So freeing yourself it takes on so many different facets, so many different ways in which you can kind of like live that out, I guess. So then what is one way or one lesson, aside from, you know, your relationship to money that you're working through, one lesson that you feel you carry out now, like your day to day, like how are you living day to day? Because like, you know, the whole point of this podcast is that you only need enough bread for today. You can't focus on like 20 years from now, because you may not even make it that far. And even if you do, you're going to be 20 years older, which means you don't care about the same things that you cared about then. And you have a
especially
whole new
not in the same way.
Exactly. And I was just talking about too in the previous episode, how like in my mid 30s, it's just some things that like I'm not even giving no credence to. Okay. Like I'm not focusing on that.
You hear me?
I can't.
The capacity to care is so low. I can't. What? Yeah,
exactly.
You know, so I think my biggest takeaway and principle that I'm trying to live into is reclaiming my imagination.
That's good. Talk about that.
Yeah, imagination is the greatest resistance in any type of thing. Whether we're talking about social justice, whether we're talking about faith, the ability to imagine is what will free you. And what systems do and routine do is train you, and it conditions you. Yes. And so when you're conditioned to think, oh, it's got to be 9 to 5, it's got to be like this, it's got to be like that. You know, police just kill Black people because that's what it is. That's what it's always been. You know, Georgia has always been red, so it's gonna stay red. Oh no, it's blue. Wait a minute. Somebody had to imagine a world where that wasn't the case, you know, and it takes that I learned to reclaim my imagination. I also had to be okay with people thinking I'm crazy, people not signing on or not validating it because they couldn't see it. And that's the biggest lesson about imagination, is that everyone, you know, in faith talk, we call it vision, everyone won't be able to see it. And sometimes you have to go at it alone and being A-okay with that. And in this season, I think we have entered a season where what we want and what we put our hands to will be successful. This window of recreation, right? Like we have so many people. I think we're at the change of the vanguard when we think about the things that we see happening in race relations, that folks feel like this is their last stand. And so they cutting up, you know. Trump illuminated that, like the deep fear for white folks really around like not being dominant culture anymore and not being majority, whatever that ever meant. And they're fighting for it. You know, we got all the footage of all of the things of why people call police on Black people, but using that as an example of like, we're in this like change of guard moment. And I think we have this opportunity and this window where we get to create. And so we're moving from, I just want to protest something. I just want to, you know, change how they treat me. And it's like, no, I'm imagining a world where I'm able to create what I know God promised me. I'm ready to beloved community. All the ways that I think that exists. Right? So I get to do that, and those who don't see the same don't have to. I don't need them, but because if I have the vision, if I have that imagination, it was given to me with purpose. And if I have been given purpose, then I can fulfill it. Right? No matter what the books say, no matter what the degrees say, no matter what they say the Bible say. Come on, let's see. Oh, we go through. No matter, no matter what it looks like,
yes,
it's in fact possible.
Yeah.
If I can imagine it, it can be.
Yeah.
That's what I'm living. I'm trying every day to live into, because each day, like you said, you get hit with something else, and you be like, oh, maybe I made that up, and it's like, no, you did make it up, which means there is no template, there is no roadmap, because you are making it up. There's not a book for you. There's not a self-help book.
You did make it
There's
up.
not a webinar. There's not, there's nothing for you to access, because it was for you to create. As a creator, you create the path, you create the template. And so living into, if I was made in God's image, and God is the creator, then I too create.
I too create.
And the question I ask at least once a week, I would like to say once a day, but I don't. We're gonna get there. What did you create? What did you design? What did you put towards that vision? What did you create that others will be able to in the future, or even now, access in order to reach if they have that same vision or goal?
That's so good. All of those things. I'm gonna just recap it for y'all, because I know you're gonna have to rewind it a couple times, right? So like, reclaim your imagination. That is so big for me, because I have never, up until this point, given myself permission to dream, to imagine, right? Even knowing all that I know about how all of this is fake, right? Yeah. It's the imagination of some random man in Britain who said, I feel like, right, the way that I situate myself in the world, like all of that, right? Being able to, so reclaiming your imagination, that signing, you have to sign on to it, right? You got to opt into it in order for it to become a reality. And I think I just want you to follow up a little bit about that, because I'm talking to you. I'm in one of my Rosie sessions, and I'm like, Rosie, but this is so scary. Absolutely. I'm afraid. Yeah. How do I free myself from the fear, right? Because in past, I have had an utter lack of validation from the people around me, right? From myself, because I've never known how to give it to myself. So then how do I free myself from that trepidation that ultimately stagnates me and keeps me in the place where I don't even get to the point where I'm asking the question, did you create? Like that's some new world, some far out. I'm not even there yet. How do I get to that place?
I think the best first step is to do risk assessment. And by risk assessment, I mean do a comparative analysis about what has others' validation actually done for you up until this point. What has living in someone else's imagination done for you in this point? You find yourself, we're depressed, we're tension filled, there's anxiety, on the social justice front, like we are literally fighting against laws and policies that mandate our death and secure that anyone who harms us is free. So why am I so committed to following the rules of people who don't love me? Ooh. I would create a list, and very literally create a list. What have I gained from this American dream, from this relationship dream, from this religious dream I've been sold? Am I truly where I want to be? And that's a part of that confrontation with yourself, because there's a lot of successful sisters out there, mind you, and people in general. It's a lot of successful sisters out there not happy, not content.
Come
And
on now.
it is, but why? And it's probably because you've committed, you've invested so much in someone else's imagination that you've neglected your own. After you create that list of like, what have I gained from this? Start thinking about, but what is possible if I took ownership? A part of why it is so scary to imagine is because then the responsibility is all on you. It is yours. It is yours.
Yeah.
No one coming to save you. There's no one coming with a plan out of the blue.
Yeah.
A lot of times I've found, Tonisha, that I am more afraid of being the reason for everything, that I would just rather be a player somewhere else instead of my own destiny. And so
Sure.
as you begin to access, like, so my risk assessment ended on, at the end of the day, if I do not envision or imagine what has been given to me and take ownership of it, who suffers? And it's not just me, was the conclusion. Like, because we're all interconnected, whether it's your family, whether it's your organization, whether it's your friends, whoever it may be. When you don't live into you and you don't invest in you and take a chance on you, others ultimately suffer, because what is locked up in you, Tonisha, what you have in your brain, I don't have. I will never be able to access that. You give it to me. And the same is true for everybody. So if I'm only doing what you're doing, then something's missing. And the risk of that missing for me was enough to say, I have to figure out how to live into this, because somebody needs to know this is made up and I can make up something else.
Exactly. And that
Everybody needs to know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's what I learned too about just money. Like, there's enough to go around. Like, we ain't got to be hoarding none of these resources, okay?
And if not, we could just print some more. So,
right, sure. We need a couple trillion.
they said put it in the bag. I was like, wait, because I was just like, because what I learned about inflation in school, like they was like, you can't just print money because then that'll change all the
Right.
And child, do you
Lo
know
and behold,
everybody? Everybody gonna get a check. And you just had to start asking questions. I'm like, hold on. So you mean to tell me people without homes, there are people who cannot eat, there are people who cannot access healthcare, and that's just to name the basic of basic.
a few.
To education, and you mean to tell me all this time these folks can't access this because of something I could just print up at any given time? Oh, what else did we make up? Now I got questions for everybody. Because if money runs America, then if that's a lie, then what else is a lie? What else can I investigate and actually figure out, like, how to print more of that too? Oh, we don't have we don't have enough jobs. Let's print some more. We don't have enough books for the babies. Let's print some more. Like, we can do that. There is more in everything that seems to be scarce. There is always more, because there are always people. And the way we get to the more goes back to their imagination. When you create the more and I create the more, then people don't have to only have that one option. Either you're poor or you're not. Either you're educated or you're not. There is a whole spectrum in which we can open up from people by just unlocking our imagination and allowing folks to access what we've been thinking about for years. So free yourself, girl. and fellas and whomever may be watching, non-binary folks, love y'all. Listen, free yourself. Like, get clear. Get very, very clear that once you open it up, something's going to come to you to help you fulfill it. People will come to you, and it'll be like they falling from the sky, Tonisha. So that when you make a decision, it'll be like, hold on, I said I wanted to make a podcast and all this equipment. So, whatever it is.
No, Rosie, listen, I told y'all, I should have told y'all in the beginning that Rosie was going to bring it, because listen, when you make a decision, because it's all like this is how I actualize everything is always working out for me. Like, even when things don't feel good, right? Yeah. When you make a decision that I'm going to trust this process, I'm going to trust what I know inside of me, right? I'm going to trust myself, because my creator has given me everything that I need, right? Everything you need is already in a seed. Like, even if you're not a biblical person, or I'm obsessed with
bars. Yes.
I'm so obsessed with that. Thank you. But because my homeboy has a farm, and I talk about his farm, but he planted he planted a bunch of stuff, but he planted a cucumber, and it produced like hundreds of cucumbers. The one little seed. Yeah. And that just made me appreciate God even more, because it's like, well, then if you can do that for a cucumber,
come on,
what can you do for me, whom you love? I am your beloved, right? And so that's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah, but I like that.
But what you're saying is only making me, like, especially in terms of the imagination, if you want to get churchy, above all you can ask or think. So if my finite mind can imagine this, what actually is possible, and not being afraid to step into that, right? And this time has shown us that you can't be afraid of it. You can't be afraid to sit with yourself. You can't be afraid to travel along the uncertainty that is life, because we know that you will get to where you're supposed to be. Like you were talking about purpose. Purpose is so important. Like remembering that you were not an accident, right? Like it wasn't unintentional. Mm-hmm. I mean, it wasn't unintentional that you came to be. And so what do you have to offer? And trusting that what you have to offer is what the people need, right? And it is what you need as well. It is what you need as well. So thank you, Rosie. Oh my God. It's so many things, but in freeing yourself, reminding my listeners that you then are able to reclaim your imagination and what you can, and if you can imagine it,
it is possible.
It's possible. And so asking yourself, what have I gained from doing it the old way? Nothing. Like I think about that all the time. Like I got these degrees that I ain't even, that's just sitting on them. Exactly. Don't even get me started.
It's like, oh.
Right. Like somebody should have told me, right? And so that's where I am now. This is only it's so good to me, because that's where I am now, trying to say, what did I gain from doing it that old way? Because my whole thing is I did it the way you told me. I went to school, I got the degrees, I got the man, I got the kids, and here I am now, just now learning how to take it one day at a time, which none of those things helped me to learn. I mean, they did, obviously in the grand scheme of things, but
yeah, what did I gain? Like, no, for real. Like, I think if folks really sit with that question of like, how am I doing in living in their imagination right now?
Stress someone else's imagination.
Because somebody's getting profit off of you living there. And I'm at the point of like, well, I might as well benefit from it. from my labor, my community minus. So the people who I love the most should actually get this 9 to 5 time frame that I'm giving to someone else who may or may not know my name. The CEO may not even know I exist.
Indeed.
But my mama is struggling to pay rent because, the vouchers are running out and housing. That seems like a very, very, very different thing that I could, if I focus my energy on, right, could change. It could change. While I'm like, oh, let me go to 9 to 5 to send her some money instead of like, no, let me create something where this is not even a thing. Where it is not possible that someone who works all their lives, raises their children on their own, who contributes to society, tax-paying citizen, this shouldn't even be a question right now for my mom. That's what I want to change. I don't even want to talk about nothing else. I want to know why this is even a thing. Oh, that's right. It's not a thing. It's not going to be a thing anymore. That's unacceptable.
Unacceptable.
That's another point, though, too, Tonisha, is that you have to decide what is unacceptable for you now. Like, having gone through the process of a pandemic and the many uprisings this past summer, of like, you can decide that no, I don't want to do that anymore. That does not feed anything. It does not create any productivity in my life. In fact, it's counterproductive. And I don't want it. I don't want it anymore. And I don't have to have it. And I don't have to. And that's the part where, like, we used to just take it. Like, I live in New Orleans, in a place where it is what it is a mentality. It is the way of life. Like, it's been this way for so long. It is what it is. Nothing's going to change. And I'm like, actually, it wasn't always that way. This city didn't even exist. When was y'all founded? Where was the inception of the city? Because that's not how. Do you know there's other places that do it different? Like, and coming in from the outside there, I'm able to clearly see, like, I'm like, oh no, this is what is actually legal here to do to your citizens is illegal in other places. Like, people,
right.
Like, no, this is actually illegal, and so it is not what it is. It's what somebody decided it was, and I can decide that it's not, because that somebody powerful than me, more deserving than me, more worthy than me. If they had a right to create it and make life miserable for me, I have the right to create something that makes life desirable and my own. I have the right to think of me first, and my family first, and my community first. And I don't have to be this selfless person that cares about the whole world and wants to see the whole world thrive, when there's a very, very key audience that God has placed in my hand. Like, no, what we're not going to do, Black women, is continue to have ulcers and diabetes and kill ourselves running ragged behind some sense of visibility to be seen as worthy, right? Like, our goal is like to somebody just hear us, hear the Black, like, we'll talk about the young men being gunned down in the street by police, or gunned down, from general population gun violence. And I wonder when we start talking about the mothers who bury them. And I think that conversation is happening before, but it's like the background that Black women play has always caused us to be more aggressive and louder, of like, no, see me, look, I'm doing it too. And then we keep saving. We save the world. We literally save the world. We save elections. I mean, y'all gonna stop telling me Black people don't
right.
Black women. We've been saving y'all. Y'all can miss me with that. And that's one of the things I find unacceptable. Okay, put that in the book for the day. Unacceptable. We've been doing what we've been doing, and we've been holding up multiple communities, particularly our own, but we've been trying to get y'all to listen, you know, and from a Black woman perspective, I'm like, why do I keep talking to people that I need to convince about I have something relevant to say and you should probably listen, as you had something to say and I listened to you. Like to negotiate worth and value. I'm not doing it.
Not in 2020. Now post a pandemic that has stripped me from everything that I've ever known. No more.
Why? And why? What has it gotten me? I'm still stressed. Girl, if I didn't have this wrap on all the grays that have come, I'm 34. I got a frontal of gray, just and I ain't had time to diet. So that's why you get this. But what have I gained? Because except I'm stressed out. You know, I my throat hurt because I've been talking to you so long. You know, like I'm not doing it anymore. So who are my people? What is my community? And when you start to create from your imagination, this is what I'm talking about. When you start creating, the people that you don't have to convince will come. And you'll realize that most of them have already been there. And they were waiting. They didn't know what they was waiting on. But once you activate, they were like, this is it, Rosie. I've had so many conversations like that. That's it, Rosie. That's what I needed. I didn't I'm like, yeah, because I finally stopped trying to figure out how to do it over there so I could bring it over here. Do it over here. And y'all can handle organizing other folk and figuring out how to make other folk want to respect and give human dignity to every human, regardless of whatever. Y'all can do that. I'm done with that. I put in my time with that. What I'm going to do now is build. What I'm going to do now is create. Creating with people in mind that I love and who I know deserve everything that God promised them. And so my mandate is to build it. I'm not waiting for it anymore. I'm not trying to jack nobody else's platform. I don't need your organization to do it. That's partner.
And not even in a selfish kind of way, right? Never. But we all have our own respective roles to play.
Yep.
And there's room for you, and there's room for me, and there's enough for you, and there's enough for me. And if we could just get it,
yep,
right? Like if we could imagine that way of being, that way of living, right? And too, because everything you're saying is like, you know, it's always like, it's got to hit you first, right? So like everything you're saying, I'm just eating it up, because realizing that you have to be okay with not being able to save the world. And I tell people that all the time, but I don't necessarily live it out myself. But I tell, you know, like you have your own unique purpose. You ain't got to save all of them other people, because that's somebody, it's enough people to go around to help, you know? And so being okay with not being able to save the world, because that was never the mandate anyway.
You couldn't. Jesus already did that according to our faith.
Right.
I can resave the world. It's already happened.
Right.
I'm like, so let me get that out. I had to, you know, like, you know what? Jesus did that. I can't save these niggas. No, really. Like, I can't. But, and so when I had such a broader you know, goal of saving the world and changing the world, it caused me to ignore the concentric circle and the people who were assigned to me, which made me a bad steward over those people who will ultimately go out and continue the process of saving the world. Because if one person could now save the world, then all of this human interaction, human connectivity wouldn't matter. Like, I need you, Tonisha, for the world to look a certain way. I can't do it by myself. And so if I manage well, if I steward well, those who have been called to me, if I impart what I have been given, if I create what has been given to me to manifest, then the world will change. But it will not change if I continue to ignore who I'm called to and what I'm called to.
That's so good. That's so good. We can
And
talk
and
about
and
it all
and
day.
be clear, and be clear. This is a recent shift. I accepted my call to ministry at 24. I'm 34. This was probably something that happened last year. Okay, so like I want everybody to be clear. This is not, I didn't wake up like this. And I'm still journeying through what that means and what it looks like to be okay. Like, no, it's not selfish, but it's also something we have to change our perspective on about centering self.
Say a little bit more about that.
So to center self means that you take into consideration first what impact this has for yourself, for your being. Because if you're not paying attention to how you are impacted in whatever you do and whatever you experience, then what you proliferate or what you put out will be inauthentic, and you'll think you're putting out something else. Kind of to the point where we're saying, like, you kind of wear the mask well. But once I start centering myself, what are my deepest desires? I want beloved community. Not selfish, but I have centered. That is a desire of mine. And it's okay to work towards something that I deeply desire. It's okay for you to work toward building a strong family unit. You don't have to feel guilty about that. You don't have to feel guilty about saying, in my community, in my household, in my career path, and whatever it is that I am centered, it is okay to care about those things and to do the work because you care about them, not because it's something you're supposed to do or told to do or, recruited to do, and now it's your responsibility. Center yourself and understand what is really happening for you. Because all relationships should benefit you in some way, and that's okay. And people don't like, people are like, oh, you're supposed to give. Even when we're talking about charity, when we are giving, it is still a relationship to that you have to assess. Some people come in with that savior complex, but for me, I've learned that when I give, it actually fuels like my 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 hope for humanity. And not because I gave, but because I saw the gratitude, and I saw that folks were really, really looking for something different. And to be able to offer that, I find it to be a blessing. And
Yeah, that's
that
good.
encourages me. And so if I'm walking away feeling like, hey, I did that, uh, you're better because of me, something went wrong.
Mm-hmm,
But if I
mm-hmm.
walk away saying, how do I do that on a large scale? How do we make sure that whatever system created the need for them to have that need, or you know what I'm saying, whatever the need was, how do we systemically change it?
Yeah.
That's what I get from it as an organizer or as a preacher or as a leader of people in that capacity. I'm always learning from those who say they learn from me. So I am centered. I am important in that conversation. It's not just about the other person. And when you are not clear that you're getting something too, and that God is trying to impart something into you as well, then you miss it, and then you're ineffective. And then you rely on rhetoric like, I want to change the world, instead of, I want to change this block. What is on my block that I'm supposed to be focused on while I'm worried about what's going on in DC?
Right.
You know about what's going on in DC, but what's going on the 57 block of Drive? That's what I need to know.
Yeah, and also just like what's going on inside of me, we are so afraid to just sit with that part of it, like what is going on inside of me that I can change. And we could talk about this all day, right? But I guess I want to folks to walk away with, if I am in fact thinking about how I can free myself, the changes that I need to make, or have been required or have been called to make because everything's shut down and ain't nowhere to go and no more comforts and right?
Absolutely.
What's the shift I can make then to kind of retain that semblance of myself, even amidst all the changes that I'm making to myself?
Yeah. Yeah.
If that makes sense, right? Like what's one of the things that we can do to kind of begin to free up ourselves as we make our lists, right? I made my list. So now what am
Yeah.
I going to do?
Mm-hmm. I think, it will be case by case, and there's no cookie cutter thing that I could say for folks. Once you make your list, whether you meditate, whether you pray, whether you have a council of friends or loved ones that you trust, you should be having conversations now about this list. I would be asking questions like, where did these things come from? Where did they originate? Where did this feeling of I have to save everybody come from? Where did this feeling of I have to reject all things money? Where did this feeling, understanding the origin story behind those things that you've confronted, and then creating a strategic plan to change it? Like there is no like, oh, I know it now and now I'm better. That's not how it works. And I think that's, really the hesitation for folks to really dig deep, because like you said earlier, like then I would have to do something about it. And so I would um I would say, as you are going through the process, be gentle with yourself, be kind to yourself, because you will find some ugly truths about yourself. There's no way to look in the mirror and only see the good and only to see the things that you've perfected. Once you dig a little deeper and you realize, dang, I thought I handled my daddy issues. I thought I dealt with my abandonment issues. I thought I dealt with, my validation issues. But this pinpoints that there's something deeper that I need to work on. So, sis, I definitely am a proponent for therapy. Go lay on somebody's
For
couch,
sure.
honey, and make, do and shop around. Don't just go to the first, psychologist.com, whatever it may be, and, shop. It's like dating. Find somebody who gets you, who understands how you think and can help you process through that. Because once you know, it's going to be helpful to hear and to have some type of consult with someone you trust, with a God you trust, whatever that grounding point is for you. You need to really sit with it and create a plan. So be kind, be gentle, but most importantly, be honest, be truthful with yourself, and know that there's the only backlash to that is that you change for the better. It can only get better when you recognize the ugly in you and decide, I don't have to, again, I don't have to do that. I don't have to be vindictive. I don't have to be bitter. I don't have to be anxious. I don't have to be depressed. I don't have to. There are remedies to all of my ailments. I just have to acknowledge them and commit. And a part of that commitment will come from you really believing that you deserve to be the person you were created to be, the person you were conditioned to be. And I don't want to be her anymore. I don't want to be the conditioned Rosie anymore. I want to be the Rosie that was created to put a stamp on this world and impact folks and give them the strength to do the same.
That's so good. We're going to end it right there, y'all, because I could talk all day. This has been such a blessing to me. And I hope that you guys have gotten something out of this. Remember, you guys, it's your bread for today, your bread for this week as you journey along. If you're listening to this before 2020 is over, and even in 2021, because things are not just going to magically go back to the way that they were. And we don't want them to either, right? No. We don't want it to. So free yourself, because in doing all of those things that Rosie said, those 3 things, right? You then free yourself up for the opposite. So whatever the opposite of anxiety is, right? Whatever the opposite of the depression is, whatever the opposite, right? Like all of those things then become available to you. And so yeah, thank you so much, Rosie. I am so excited.
And I love you.
I love you. And I'm so happy. I really appreciate you taking this time with us. Okay. So Absolutely. That's all we got for you today, folks. Your bread for today, your bread for this week is just to free yourself. Peace.